What's up, everyone? This is Nox, and GGG just released the new Ascendancies for Druid, and I am going to go over them in this video. All right, so starting off with Oracle, GGG released these Ascendancy points today, just a few minutes ago, and I decided to finally make this league start video. Let's talk about each of these nodes. So Lesser Harm looks very powerful as a defensive node. Crit chance against you is unlucky, and damage of enemies hitting you is unlucky. It's just a very strong defensive buff, a really good 2-pointer for defense. But behind it is one of the strongest offensive nodes, I think, in the entire game, especially if you use it correctly. So Forced Outcome says inevitable critical hits. And what that tooltip says is hits which could potentially be a critical hit, but do not roll a critical hit, will re-roll critical hit chance until they succeed. But hits have 30% less critical damage bonus for each time critical hit chance was re-rolled. So you might think, I was like, oh, well, so you have guaranteed crit, but you have less crit hit damage, which is true. However, these gloves exist. Your critical damage bonus is 250%. No sources of less critical damage bonus apply to these gloves because you can already use it. You already have supports in the game that have this mod of less critical hit damage bonus. Malagaro's Virtuosity is insane with Forced Outcome. This is 100% crit chance. So this completely solves your crit chance with 0 investment on the tree. It is 2 Ascendancy points, so there is an opportunity cost there, certainly. But 250% critical damage bonus is insane. Just something to consider. This is a universally incredibly powerful node, especially when paired with the gloves. If you don't have the gloves, it's a little bit less powerful. You're going to need some crit chance, or you're going to want some crit chance probably. But generally speaking, this combo is going to be insane. Expect these gloves to be expensive. Moving on to the next one, we have Untamed Heartwood, +1 maximum number of summoned totems. Totems die 6 seconds after their life is reduced to 0. This is really nice. You don't have to invest into totem life. Basically, they just still stay up for a full 6-second duration, even if they are one-shot immediately. We have Converging Paths. This is the moment of vulnerability that was showcased in the trailer, where like kind of the ghost of the boss pops up. You basically press this button. It has this little nova that comes out on enemies that are primed for stun, electrocution, or freeze, causes a vision of them to appear, kind of like that we saw in the video, and then lasting as long as the original target would have been hit by an immobilization. And then 98% of the damage dealt to the time visage is also dealt to the original targets. So if you spam AoE, like if these visages are on top of each other, you can spam AoE directly on top of them and it hits both of them. That seems like a pretty cool effect. The problem is how often enemies are timed for stun and freeze or whatever. That's kind of, I don't know. You would have to invest a lot into stun duration, into freeze duration. This seems like a cool idea, but it's a 10-second delay before the enemy can be affected again. So you're dealing double damage for a few seconds every 10 seconds. Not really sold on the power of this. It looks cool, but I'm not very sold on the power of it. Next, we have Harmony of Within. Hit damage taken from mana before life if your current mana is higher than your current life. Less maximum life, less maximum mana. Now, I'm assuming current life and current mana is not a percentage. It is an actual numerical value. And so if this is the case, this is 100% mind over matter when you have CI. If it is a numerical value, then it's also 100% mind over matter if you have CI, because you'd have to have 0 mana for it to hit you. So this is a very, very nice, strong buff. And I think that combining it with Chaos Inoculation is a powerful, powerful defensive node, because you don't get a downside of less mana recovery from mind over matter. Next, we have Align Fate. So this is the one where you're like, the spells on your action bar and they basically light up, and if you press that one before you press the next one, you get 30% more damage. If theoretically you only press those spells, it would be a 30% damage buff, but the problem is that there is a 9.15 second delay between visage. There is an increased Viz's frequency per spell that could be cast. I'm not sure how high you can get this. I'm assuming you can get it pretty high, so it's probably every other cast you're getting 30% more damage. So this could be very powerful if you build around it, but it basically forces you to play a multi-button playstyle, and I know a lot of people are not a fan of that. I'm not a huge fan of that myself, but something to consider. Then we have the Unseen Path. That's the 250 extra passive nodes or whatever it is that are Oracle exclusive. The points leading up to here, I believe, give 1 passive point. That was leaked in something else on POEDB. But yeah, so Walk the Path Untaken. These are the extra passive nodes, the one that was like Chance to Avoid Death on Hid and some minion stuff. We have to see what all of these passives are to determine how powerful this is. Behind this, however, is Entwined Realities, and it's non-keystone passives within a medium radius around keystone passive skills. And then we have Entwined Realities, and this is non-keystone passives in a medium radius of allocated keystone passive skills, can be allocated without being connected to your tree. So quickly pulling up Path of Building here. We don't have an exact, copy of the current tree or of the new tree coming out, but let's just say you wanted Resolute Technique, for example. So you took Resolute Technique here. A medium radius is the turquoise line around this jewel. So you can imagine this circle just being moved over here. All of these could then be allocated without any of the points leading up to them. So if you already wanted a keystone, this would be something very powerful to take. Now, is it worth 4 Ascendancy points to get to? That's really the question of how good are these paths from the Unseen Path, and how many of these keystones do you really want to be taking? I would imagine if you can take 2 or 3 keystones in the Druid area, and they all have some pretty valuable passives around them, this might be worth taking. But again, it's still very up in the air. And one of the reasons why I'm not really keen on starting Oracle. Forced Outcome is insane, like I said, with Malagaros, but we will see how expensive that is on League Start. Next, we have the Shaman. So just going sort of from top to bottom here, we have Sacred Flow, plus 40 to Spirit for each of your empty charm slots. This is, 120 Spirit for basically free. Charms are useful. They're, good for freeze, bleed, stun immunity, those sort of things. So you are giving up quite a bit, but 120 Spirit is very powerful. That's, prefix on your amulet, prefix on your chest that you don't need anymore. That's several extra minions. I'm sure Gazi's pretty happy about that. I'm not really too sure on it. I'm not really a minion enjoyer, so I don't spend too much time thinking about how many minions that could give you. But this, could be nice for some extra auras, something like that. Next, we have Wisdom of the Magi. So you gain benefits of bonded modifiers on runes and idols. So they showcase this in the reveal. We have to see what all of these are, but essentially every rune and every idol are going to have bonus modifiers that Shaman can take advantage of that nobody else can if they spec this node. We then have Druidic. Then we have Druidic Champion, and this is every 2 rage, also grants 1% more spell damage. So this is half as good as the bonus attack damage that rage gives, but then instead applies to spells. And then up past it, you have Furious Wellspring. You have no inherent loss of rage. You regenerate 6% of your maximum rage per second. Increases and reductions to mana regeneration also apply to rage regeneration rate, and skills have a +5 rage cost, +7 to maximum rage. This is big. Like, this is a really, really powerful node. There's a reason why it's behind the other one. Skills costing rage probably is going to be a problem unless you have Giga Mana Regen. Arcane Surge would apply to this, by the way, and that would be very nice. However, most Druid spells and some others, like we previously mentioned with Firestorm, have a pretty long duration. So you're going to be getting all of this, you're going to be getting 5 rage back pretty quickly if you're regenerating 6% per second. So the duration of Firestorm, I believe, is by default 6 seconds. So you just imagine you're jumping a few firestorms out, your rage regens, you're jumping a few firestorms out, rinse, repeat. Volcano is similar, tornado is similar, the other water your plants, thunderstorm is similar. This is a very powerful node. Not sure how useful it will be. We really need to see like the tuning of these duration based spells. This is not really something that you want to have giga high cast speed on unless you also have giga high mana regeneration rate. So I would be interested to see how this works with and then we have reactive growth, which gives us another new keyword. So this has 10% less elemental damage taken. And then it says adapt to the highest elemental damage type of each hit you take. Each adaptation grants 10% less damage taken of that adaptation's type. So adaptations are gained by taking elemental damage from hits and cause you to take less damage from that tip from subsequent hits. So it never gives you value on the first hit you take. So you always have, 10% less elemental damage taken, but then say you just take, 1 fire damage, then you have 10% less damage taken of the next hit of fire damage, which is very interesting. I think this is a pretty strong defensive node, but I think this is sort of like one of these forced 4-pointer nodes. The 10% less elemental damage taken might be worth it on its own, especially if you're kind of strapped for points. You're not really interested in taking, any of these other 4-point nodes, but it's something to think about. Then we have Avatar of Evolution. 5% of physical damage taken is cold, fire, and lightning. Adaptations have a duration of 5 seconds, and you have double adaptation effect. So the adaptations being that you adapt to the highest elemental damage type of each hit is a bit unfortunate. If this gave you 3 adaptations every time you took physical damage, this would be very, very, very strong. But as it stands right now, I'm not really sure, and I'm not really convinced that this is worth 4 Ascendancy points. It is really tanky, maybe something for hardcore, but I just don't really see this being worth that many Ascendancy points. Then we have Turning of the Seasons. Enemies in your presence have exposure, and you gain 10% of damage as extra damage of a random element. This is very nice. This might be something you could use to benefit from Trinity if you were using like a multi-element spell or a multi-element build. But just in general, enemies in your presence having exposure is very nice. Just a good, solid buff, and you don't have to, worry about Frostbomb or any other sources of exposure. This is just nice to have up all the time. And then we have Apocalypse, which Ziggy D showcased in his video, and I will play some because it looked absolutely insane.
Of your build. Even if it wasn't super quickly, it went okay. She moves around a lot. Doing this on Wyvern, I was like groaning walking up to it, but it was okay. Apocalypse and some range spam from Wyvern form handled it fairly well. Even if it wasn't super quickly, it went okay. I'm coping.
It is buffed in terms of the glory required for it to be used, which is nice. Buffed from the Ziggy D video, I mean. And so it seems pretty strong. This is obviously not 100% uptime sort of thing. And I don't know if this is something you can build around. It seems like just like an extra button to sort of nuke bosses. I think if it's heavily supported and you have the damage to do it, this could be your boss nuke, and then you could work on something else for clear. All right, so final thoughts on the Druid. I think Oracle looks insane, especially with Forced Outcome and Malagaros. It really, like, most of the power of this Ascendancy for me, and most of the interest in this Ascendancy after these first 2 points here, comes from Paths Not Taken and Entwined Realities. It depends on where these are in the tree. It depends on how many keystones we want to take. I know they talked about adding a bunch of different new keystones to the Druid area, and I know this walk the paths not taken probably is around there, some of them, and I'm sure these can be allocated with this. That's something to think about, but I'm not too sold on Oracle. This is really a sort of wait and see situation. And then over at Shaman seems generally pretty powerful. There is, some spirit here. There's some runes and idols here, just generally powerful nodes, pretty strong defensive nodes. Apocalypse really is just a how often can you have it up sort of situation, and how much damage does it really do. It seemed to be doing pretty decent for Ziggy D with no supports, he said, but we'll see what it looks like when it's fully supported and all of that. I think generally this Rage package seems very strong and something you could consider. I don't think Druid is going to be the first class for me, although I will be playing around with the new transformations. But that'll be for the next video. Thank you guys very much for watching. I will be streaming the entire league start, so go ahead and follow me on Twitch if you're interested. Thank you very much, and I will see you guys next time.